a recommendation to Houston because it's their water that's being utilized for this program. So I wanted to mention that. Also want to mention that regional cooperation really is one of the major emphases that we're trying to accomplish. When we met with TDM over the last month, that was really one of the biggest points they made, is that, guys, our region has to work together. All of the flood funding that's going to be distributed under Senate Bill 7 will be prioritized and scored, and regional cooperation is one of the factors on which you'll be scored. You've got to have agreement among the communities impacted by future projects. So that's one of the points we really wanted to try to achieve with this, was a recommendation where we can work with the City of Houston and achieve something that will be as close to a win-win as possible. And I would also like to mention that I really appreciate the efforts. A number of residents from both Lake Houston and Lake Conroe have been meeting together since our last board meeting. We've gotten reports from them on some very successful discussions, and I appreciate that effort. Whatever decision we make tonight to send a recommendation back to Houston, certainly I don't want that to end those efforts. I think those efforts are valuable, and there's always opportunities in the future to reconsider or modify this program further based on those efforts. So I would encourage those residents to continue that. A couple of things staff would urge you to consider as you're deliberating and thinking about a recommendation that you'd like to make is that however we structure this, staff would like to incorporate recognition that the City of Houston's authority, or they have the authority with regard to their water rights. And we would like in the future for the City of Houston staff to notify us when and how much they want diverted under this program. I mean, it's a cooperative program, and that's what we want it to be. But we really feel the proper protocol, since they're releasing we're releasing their water from Lake Conroe, is that they call and notify us in writing when they would like those diversions to start. We think that would be the proper approach for operations in the future. And also, if you would like to consider pre-release as some part of this recommendation, we would urge that that be initiated by Houston in writing as a call for diversion. They do own and operate the reservoir that those flows have to pass through. They have to manage that reservoir before, during, and after the storm. And it would be staff's recommendation that if that's part of the recommendation, it should be initiated by Houston in writing.
Making those calls. So I think that's something that makes it certainly more palatable to the board, I would think. So the comments about, I want to give a little reflection on what I've detected in this meeting. First off, the ones of you who are still here, for the password to your friends and compadres, I want to commend you on your behavior. You, for the most part, you really were, you did great. People were, for the most part, respectful. The overriding theme I've heard, not just from elected officials, but the individuals on this issue, there seems to be a continuing theme of let's work together and come up with some cooperative effort that works for both of us. That was one of the reasons I was interested in the executive directors of the Conroe Chamber and the Lake Houston Area Chamber to encourage a committee from each of your groups to be able to sit down together and discuss and come up with ideas that you think are to get us through this time frame that we need until construction projects and things can be implemented, and the need for reductions here continue to decrease as those things get implemented into place. And so I'm very appreciative of the fact that individuals, the first thing, there's some really smart people on both sides of this issue. Not just the political arena, but the individual citizens. And I want to compliment you on the fact that you've used that initiative and effort to try to come together and make things. There's no one here that I can see that wants any animosity between this. I was discussing with someone a while ago, I said these are two communities that are 50 miles apart, really only 6 inches apart is basically where I think we are. So I appreciate all that everyone's done. I appreciate people taking the time. This is not a cheap endeavor to put this together. I think I was asked by someone, could I put something like this together for a campaign for somebody's election? I don't think we did want to do it on this basis, but anyway, the theme of cooperation, I think, is very critical. We've heard ideas over the last 2 months of meetings. Still a lot of misinformation, but over time we'll get that corrected. And I just want to congratulate you again on your conduct behavior. I think we had approximately 1,400 people here to conduct something as passionate as this issue, and for people to have maintained their composure and conduct this is a compliment to your maturity, so I want to thank y'all for that. The issue before us now is to entertain ideas or motions or open for discussion of proposals that people may have or motions, and I think I'd open it up for anyone that wants to make a recommendation.
I'd like to make a comment.
Oh, sure.
I'd especially like to thank the people from River Plantation that were here tonight, because I think their testimony was something that we hadn't heard to this point. And it became more and more evident to me that we need to focus on holding as much water back as possible when we realize how close they live under that dam. While you all might not think this Freeze and Nickel study shows that it does as much help as you think, we have history behind us. We know, and it was presented to our board by Chuck a few months ago, that this pre-lowering strategy was effective. And it did prevent us from having to release multiple times over the 2018-2019 season. So I don't want to leave tonight without you understanding that there is history that shows that this process has helped. Also, the city's proposal pretty much, aside from 4 inches, mirrors what Mother Nature traditionally does to this river. And I think that's really important to show that, we're not asking for something that Mother Nature hasn't done on the average over these years. And the other thing, 2 final things I'd like to leave with, is the Lake Conroe. We all discussed the percentage of release over the total percentage of an effect on the West Forest and Lake Houston, whether it would be 14% or 24%. We have to remember, it is the only controllable flow at this point that we have any effect on. Well, a lot of work is being done upstream, buying golf courses for detention to move forward. Currently, the Lake Conroe Dam is the only way to control the flow coming down the West Fork. And in closing, I'd like to bring to your attention something that was said tonight but not necessarily highlighted. In my professional work, I work a lot with the Atlas 14 new amounts of rainfall. And what was once the 500-year flood rainfall is now the 100. So we shouldn't be making decisions by looking in our rearview mirror. We need to be looking at decisions by looking forward and what we can expect moving forward in terms of rainfall. And I am very proud of our elected officials and the money that they have designated, especially our federal representatives here in the room, the state representatives, to bring help to this area, because it didn't happen after '94, and we will finally see an end to this very shortly.
Think of a relatively easy or simple thing to do for our elected officials. It takes a lot of work and a lot of meetings and a lot of things and a lot of no's and them having to figure out ways to make this happen. And from the U.S. congressional level, I want to thank them for their work, from the state of Texas and the city of Houston and the flood management in Harris County. All of these things are, it's essential, and it's why this has to be resolved effectively, because we're asking not just for communities, we're asking for governmental entities to show a sense of cooperation, and we have to do it, they have to do it. The flood mitigation is not one size fits all and one action cures the problem. We recognize that the Sanderson River West Fork can contribute arguably 10%, and that's the control point. But it's part of the bigger picture, and we have to look at this as a regional coastal flooding issue. It's not strictly limited to one area. Actions that we're taking are one small part of a huge picture of things that are occurring. Construction projects, dredging on the river, all of these things are trying to be done in relative concert. So we all have to be a part of that effort. And so, just my 2 cents worth, in my opinion. So, having said that, I'm welcome input from any other.
Yeah, so I like, Karen, your idea about not looking back. I think what, from my point of view, we're driving a decision based on something that happened in the past, hard. And to me, that was an outlier. A 1,000-year storm. It's not even a 500. So, and the data that I've heard says that the lowering doesn't help. So what I would like to propose is that we stop the seasonal lowering, but we consider a pre-release strategy, as Mark stated earlier.
Okay, is that a motion?
I'll make that a motion, yes.
All right, you have a motion of, I guess, essentially stopping the release. Do I have a second? Okay, we don't have a second. The motion fails. We're back up for discussion.
I'd like to address the board for a motion, and that is that I think that we ought to consider the 1-foot drop as recommended by staff. I think we ought to consider that because it is a conservation reservoir and the city owns the water, that the city, if they want to implement a pre-release, would be by written letter back to the board or back to the Sanderson River Authority, and that we exercise a 1-foot drop in the spring, a 1-foot drop in the fall, and pre-release would be by cooperation between the City of Houston and Sanderson River Authority. I'd like to make that recommendation for the next 2 years, and we reconsider it in 2 years, where we know what the status is on the projects with the gates and the other things that are occurring downstream.
Okay, and I'm not sure, are you essentially recommending the staff's recommendation?
Yes, the 1-foot in the spring, 1 foot in the fall.
Okay, with a little different, well, can I offer some modifications to that. I've actually spent some time considering some of these issues, and so as a modification to what you're saying, I had put together some notes myself tonight, and I think what I'd like to add to this is what I've got incorporates what you're saying, but it also incorporates suggested compromise of the governmental entities involved, and it accomplishes very closely to what Mayor Turner and Mayor Pro Tem Martin have suggested, but with a little bit of a twist that would take some, and let me just, I'll put it this way. I would suggest a recommended compromise for a regional approach and in cooperation with other regional flood mitigation efforts and entities, recognizing that the City of Houston has the ultimate authority to call for other amounts at any time they desire of their lake volume. And I would offer this following recommendation for the board's consideration. Number one, lake lowering in the spring of 2020 to be 200 feet from April 1st to May 31st. That's no change in existing policy. Number two would be lake lowering in the fall of 2020 to 200 feet, again, August the 1st to October the 1st. If an additional 6 inches of water is desired by the City of Houston in the fall, which would be the 18 inches that has been mentioned, my recommendation is that it be delayed until after September the 1st, which is the Labor Day holiday. My logic there is the businesses on the lake, that's a very, very heavy season for them. Children and families are still vacationing through, and by September the 1st, if they called for and added the last 6 inches after that, generally there's a turn down of recreational activity on the lake. This would probably not Harm businesses on the lake as much as they typically have. And then if the City of Houston exercises the option for after September the 1st, that would bring it down to 199.5 feet. Like I said, just delay it till after September the 1st to give it the chance to get through the high boating season, the high activities for recreational activities. We still would have the 18 inches, but we basically implement the foot from August to September, and then after September the 1st, bring it in. It would extend out the timing of the reduction to where it would be out of peak season for the sake of the lake. The numbers are the same, it's just I'm asking that it be spread over a larger time frame. The spring and fall lowerings would be coordinated with the City of Houston, Lake Houston, and San Center Authority operations to maximize the flood mitigating efforts during any storm or weather activities. Close coordination with the City of Houston on that. Require the City of Houston to notify the SGRA in writing for requested diversions, including prior to named storms predicted to impact our region within a 5-day forecast. And while the SRJRA does not recommend releasing water prior to a storm, it recognizes the City of Houston has full authority and responsibility to request such a diversion. I would request this, the recommendation would be valid through 2022, which is the projected date that the gates would be completed and operational on the lake. We would also have, I think it was $30 to $40 million worth of additional mechanical dredging work on the river itself. So we would have two major accomplishments at the same time, and then 2022 we go back and revisit this. That's my recommendation.
Respectfully, I have a point of order.
Sure.
Don't you think we should, as a board, consider our partners' proposals before making our own proposals moving forward?
You're talking about the city of Houston? Well, I'm asking to modify his motion.
Well, then I guess I'm asking to modify yours to what the city of Houston.
I'm asking to modify
Point of order.
Jim's motion. That, I'm asking for that modification to your motion.
I would accept that modification.
Okay.
Lloyd, can I ask you one thing?
No. Okay.
Did you say, what was the end date that you mentioned?
I mentioned 2022 as the end date.
Okay.
Unless everybody wants to revisit this every year.
End of 2022 or beginning?
Oh, you would get particular. I think it almost has to go to end of 2022 because that is the earliest projected date that I think the gates could get.
So your recommendation meets with the proposal that the staff has recommended, with the exception of the additional 6 inches.
That I would request that the city could still call, but to call.
Which
it
also goes fairly well along the same lines as what the city of Houston has recommended.
It's similar, but it gives the
Close.
benefit to the people on the lake of not losing their most business-oriented time frame to, because there's definitely a recreational downturn after Labor Day. And so that, I'm just trying to extend the time that the lake would stay up enough that we wouldn't have safety issues and things.
I really do think that I'd like to amend the motion and put forth the City of Houston's motion. Jake's talked about the regional cooperation that needs to occur. And in addition, when we're talking about August, the #1 month that hurricanes and storms hit is August. August is the #1 month for storms. Excuse me. September is the #1 month for storms. August is #2 and October is #3. And Harvey happened during August. Multiple other storms have happened during August. And the capacity that we need is during the month of August, in my opinion. Also, when you look at it, the median, not the mean, because the mean is I understand it takes into account the drought years, but the median lake level on August 31st is 200.2 from 1999 to 2016. And so when you're talking about a 200 level, you're really talking about no release whatsoever. You're talking about just what Mother Nature naturally does. So I'd like to amend your motion to accept the City of Houston's proposal.
Okay, and I would add that the 11,000 acre feet reduction in Lake Houston is the equivalent to 6-point-something inches of equal equivalent to a reduction in Lake Conroe. So we would basically have that in what I'm proposing, because you would have Lake Houston 11,000 acre feet down, which translates upstream. I know it's not a direct translation, but it does provide another 6 inches. So,
I think we have to ask for a second before we have discussion, don't we?
well, we've got basically two different. You're proposing. Huh?
Jim agreed to your amendment. Now do you agree? If not, we have to call.
Well, it's
Somebody has to second my amendment, correct?
well. There's an amendment. I mean, there's a motion there already. Correct.
Jim made a motion.
Correct.
It was amended. Jim accepted the amendment. He made it. Then it was amended by recognition. Do you accept the amendment?
Or somebody has to accept it.
Yes.
If I understand correctly, you're just saying take the City of Houston's recommendation without any other, with no modifications to it.
That's correct.
Okay, is that what we want to vote on, or do we want any other input? He's offering as an alternative to what I modified. The proposal is relatively simple. The difference between the two, if I understand correctly, is I'm saying that the releases beyond the the call for diversion is by the city of Houston. City of Houston's proposal is requiring the term pre-release with us. I wouldn't support that,
But didn't they ask for it in their letter to us? Didn't they ask for a 6-inch pre-release?
and I gotta be real careful about getting off in discussions about pre-release, due to pending.
No, I'm just asking, don't you think the city asked for it in their letter?
Their proposal asks for us to initiate those actions. And what I'm proposing is that any actions of releasing water or anything for the additional 6 inches in, after Labor Day would be their initiation of that. And anything that came prior to any named storm and the predicted impact in our region would be initiated by the city of Houston, not by us.
So what is the downside to the additional 6 inches? It sounds to me like that is a good proposal.
It has everything that I can see.
And I'd like to hear from some of the other board members as to what that downside might be.
So my concern is that we're not considering river plantation. The difference between these two proposals is we're not considering the fact that this isn't Kingwood versus Montgomery County. In river plantation is directly down south of the dam, and we need to protect those people. And I think they made some compelling arguments today. And I think the difference between your proposal and the city's proposal will definitely positively affect river plantation.
And it puts us in a position of the city calling for releases, not us.
I think, my opinion is the water is the city's. The city has the most information about what their water supply situation is, and a release of any water over and above the seasonal lowering ought to be at the request of the city based on all the information that they have available.
Well, the city's made a request for us to just seasonally lower. So I don't understand what you're saying.
But at this point right now, we do not know what the conservation level is for the city's water. The water was primarily for domestic use. And I think that we have to allow them to have the opportunity to evaluate what's their situation at the time of requesting that release. That's my opinion.
I think they could always make the change. This letter was co-signed by the Director of Public Works. And I think she has a good understanding of what her needs of water and other sources of water supply for the city are.
That's correct. And if they wanted to release the water, they would make that release.
But they did make the request.
They ask it as a recommendation. We're saying that we want a written request at the time they want the releases or the diversion. And that's, actually, I think what I'm proposing, now may be confusing more. What I'm proposing is very little off from what the city has requested. It extends the time period in the fall to 1 foot up until Labor Day. And then if they decide, if the city of Houston decides they want to take another 6 inches just because of climatic conditions or predicted weather or whatever it happens to be, they have the option to give us notice and say, in the month of September, we want another 6 inches. That, we would rather have them tell us that for obvious reasons. And anything that is related to named storms or something like that, again, we want the city of Houston to tell us that they want to divert whatever amount they say to do. Other than that, I think it's just the wording. I think we're aligned somewhat with that. I'm just trying to buy more time for the activities on the lake to try to help commercial establishments, because when we take an action to fix a reduction of, let's say, 18 inches in August, it's not if, I mean, on the storage portion, yeah, we absolutely have that storage portion, but it's not if there's a storm or if there's rain. For the commercial establishments on the lake, it's absolute. When you lower it, it absolutely hammers the business. So I think the difference is one is a preventive measure, the other is an absolute measure. I'm just trying to stretch out further the time frame that we go to a sub 200 foot level. Personally, the fact that the average level of that lake that time of the year or year round is about 200 feet. In a lot of cases, it, like you said earlier, it may not be anything, but it could be when you hit the September portion. I just want to make sure that when additional releases are required, that it's the City of Houston calling for it. And as opposed to us establishing it as a, not necessarily a policy, as a recommendation. Is anybody else, I mean, if I'm being unclear, I think what I'm doing is following pretty closely what, in what you said. It is a blend of both of the recommendations.
I think one thing that you need to remember is that when we release over Labor Day, we take a whole month to release in August. So the difference of your weekend, Labor Day weekend, it's not that. It's 4 days and we're releasing like an inch a day. So not even an inch a day.
It depends where you start.
Right. And usually we're starting at that point at 1 foot 4 inches down. So arguing over that little bit is nothing.
Well, but if we go into August and through September the 1st at 200 feet, okay, and the desire for the City of Houston is 1.5 feet, then there may not be any reduction during that time period, but from after September the 1st, they would have the option of saying, we want another 6 inches of water, and then they could call for it.
But Lloyd, the strategy behind pre-release, and I mean, I wish the seasonal lowering was 0 and you could get 24 inches out in 2 days and we wouldn't be having this discussion, and maybe when there's permanent gates on Lake Houston, that's where we're going to be. But the benefit to me of of pre-release policy is that you don't pre-release. It's not an additional temporary lowering because you want to do it. It's there if there is a storm and there's a threat of a storm and there's a threat of flooding. And so I don't understand boxing and giving the City of Houston only the option to take that after September 1st. That option needs to be there if there's a named storm that's coming in and 40 inches of rain or 30 inches of rain are projected. And if that's August the 2nd or August the 5th.
No, I'm not saying that we're not taking any options away from the City of Houston. They got the option to take 3 feet out of there if they want, anytime they want. So I recognize that. I'm just saying that if there's a named storm in the Gulf and they have excellent people in their water department, they have as good a tie-ins with national weather and projections and all that, emergency management people as anyone. I just would rather have them be the ones that make the call when and how much and just give it to us in writing. They have the authority and they have the responsibility. The only thing I'm saying is I don't want it to be a part of what we propose, that there's some pre-release strategy involved. It's a strategy that can be implemented by the City of Houston just like that. It's their water. If they see a storm coming in and they notify us and they say, we think the weather projects it here, they send us a request and we do what they tell us to do. So,
I don't think we're proposing anything. I mean, I think first of all, we're at 2 feet. We have for the last year and a half, we've been down 2 feet. The City of Houston has done an analysis, and based upon what they're going to be doing in maintenance in Lake Houston, they have come up with a compromise solution, and they would like to, instead of 2 feet, be down 1.5 feet. So they've compromised from that standpoint, but they're virtually pre-releasing 1.5 feet for the season. So they're calling for it right now. They put it in writing and they're asking for it. It's not our proposal, it's their proposal.
As a policy, we don't pre-release into storms. That's been the extension of River Authority's position for forever.
No, we understand. So if we pre-release anything over the 1.5 feet, I understand your concern. They would have to send it to us in writing.
Okay. Maybe it's better if I take this point by point.
Lloyd, can I just capture what I have so far? Just for clarity for a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we're talking about the same thing. We're just using different words.
It's a little different, but it's
a little
close.
different.
Let me see if I can frame it up, just get us back on the same page. Current motion is an amendment by Tisdale of Mr. Alexander's original motion. It was accepted, and this is what I have. 200 feet in the spring, which is same months, April, May, no change. 200 feet in the fall, August, September, no change on the date there. You've proposed the option of an additional 6 inches of pre-release to 199.5, called on by the city of Houston, but after Labor Day. You've limited it to after Labor Day.
Yeah.
Through December 2022. That is basically 6 inches below what City of Houston is recommending,
Well,
without the limitation of after Labor Day, just to kind of clarify the difference between the two.
well, is it, because the compromise they've hit is 18 inches.
They've
So
asked-
we would be at 18 inches after September the 1st. So I'm just saying is I'd like to stretch out the time frame that we go to 18 inches. It's fine to drop it a foot in the August, September to September the 1st, but don't take 18 inches out. They were taking 2, but don't take the 18 inches out in the August to September the 1st. Take 1 foot and then take the other 6 inches after September the 1st. What time frame works, it's up to the city. So
Lloyd, the difference I want to point out is the additional 6 inches below 200 automatic? So after Labor Day, we're just going to do it? Or is after Labor Day, are you saying they have the option to do 6 inches if a storm comes in the Gulf?
I'm open on that. I mean, if they just say, after September the 1st, we want you to the recommendation back to us is lower another 6 inches, I'm good with that. I don't have a problem with that.
My opinion is that what you're going to do is you're going to force the hand of the city of Houston to go take either 6 inches or a foot on August 1st, because they've asked for 18 inches on August 1st and 6 inches of a named storm. So you're liable to get a worse result for the people on Conroe right now.
You could.
if that's what we do.
You could, but we don't control the weather. I mean, it's very possible that both of those scenarios could hit and you'd be at 2 feet plus. But that's just something that I think is a reasonable trade-off, the risk of that happening.
Yeah, well, 2 points that I want to make. I mean, and I asked Chuck and Jace this question, right? I mean, the Jacinto River Authority, in my opinion, would have more knowledge of the watershed, of how the water goes between the Lake Conroe Dam and into Lake Houston. And I don't know that I believe Coastal Water Authority has the knowledge and the expertise. I'm sure they have the people on staff to have the knowledge and the expertise. But wouldn't y'all agree that you two have, and our staff has more knowledge and would be more capable of implementing a pre-release strategy if that's what we desire?
I would not.
So you don't think you have more knowledge than Coastal Water Authority?
I don't think we have more knowledge than the City of Houston's Water Division and the Harris County Emergency Management.
I don't know if
On that section of the lake?
I don't know if I want to
that section of the
speculate.
river?
I don't know if I want to speculate about the knowledge of the staff, because I don't know all their staff.
Yeah, but again, it's the
Mark-
San Jacinto River Authority, which goes all the way into Lake Houston. I mean, that's what we are. I mean, that's our river authority. And don't we want to control, and long-term, don't we want to coordinate with Coastal Water Authority and come up with policies and procedures that ultimately get us to a better solution than where we're at today?
Yes, we will
Mark,
definitely continue to
But Mark,
coordinate.
are you just looking at it from a flood control, or are you looking at it from a drinking water supply perspective?
Well, no, I think that right, the city of Houston, if they need it from a drinking water standpoint, I mean, they're gonna call the water. I mean, if there's no pre-releases or anything, no seasonal lowering going on.
It's looking at the dependable yield from the storage reservoir of Lake Conroe. And I think the city of Houston probably has a better ability to be able to understand their total water supply than what we do as Lake Conroe.
Right.
But we're still talking, we're talking compliant with the totals that the city of Houston has proposed. We're talking 200 in the fall, in the spring, and we're talking 199 and a half in the fall. I'm just saying is, as we extend out the period of time that we get to that last 6 inches into September, for nothing other than the economic impact it has on the lake.
Lloyd, the difference is Houston's request is for 24 inches total.
Originally.
18 plus 6. Your proposal, as I understood it, was for 12 plus 6.
Correct.
Okay, so is that additional 6 after Labor Day only in the event of a named storm, or is it automatic? Or is it just at their call?
If we just say it's automatic to 199 and a half, because that's the numbers I saw in the mayor's letter, then we could say after September the 1st, we reduce after that another 6 inches. We wouldn't have to have the city of Houston be involved if they didn't want to be. The only other variable is when you have a named storm that we would want the city of Houston to be the one that called for release in that situation. Other than that, I don't really see any difference in what they propose other than the time frame that we do it.
My concern is the city has made us an offer that we pretty much can live with. It isn't too far off from your offer. And my concern is that they've come up with a compromise and it's a guarantee that they're not gonna then call for 2 feet right away. And they've offered us this compromise and they are our regional partner. And I would much prefer to take the compromise of what they're saying that they're offering than to bank on the fact that they could come back and go with their original 3 feet or something 2 feet later on.
And I can't do anything about that, okay? The other thing about it is,
Because they have loose bayou. They can, call as much water as they want to because they have loose bayou that they can pull water from.
keep in mind that what we're doing here is a recommendation. Anything we say here is a recommendation can be kicked to the curb just like that, like you're saying. So we're just making a recommendation that we think incorporates the science related to what we're doing and the recommendation of staff. This is not the recommendation of staff. This is modification away from recommendation of staff. It's kind of a compromise between the two. I'm not trying to change the raw numbers. I'm just trying to change the time frame that fall lowering goes to. We can establish it as a motion to automatically do that, like Marcus, I think, suggested. We're saying that the call for any named storm activity, we would want the city of Houston to notify us to call for that reduction.
So we're ignoring their proposal and we're just going off on making our own proposal.
I don't see, maybe it's just me, I don't see that much difference between what the city has proposed and what I'm offering or suggesting. I see 6 inches difference, that's all I'm seeing.
Then let's go ahead and vote on what the city's proposal is.
I'm sorry.
Then let's go ahead and vote on what the city's proposal is if you don't see much of a difference.
Well, we have I think we have a motion. Okay, we've got too many. I'm going to table the motion, and I'll give Jim the opportunity to maybe restate the motion.
Restate the motion?
Yeah, I tabled the motion.
Restate it.
Yeah, restate it. If you want to incorporate these comments, you can restate the motion. And I'm not sure, do you understand the motion, what I'm saying?
We need to understand what we're voting on.
I think Jason's done a very, very good job of restating it.
Okay, let's let Jace restate it.
I think that the real issue is that the additional 6 inches after September 1st, I would agree would be based on a request from the city.
Okay, and I think that's the only two things we're saying is a request from the city for the additional 6, a request from the city for any releases in the face of a named storm that is that clear?
No.
Okay, good.
We-
My wife is right.
We've got to distinguish between release before a named storm and what you want to set the seasonal lowering at. So
Then should we use numbers? 199 in the fall, 200 in the spring? 199 and a half, I'm sorry. That was the number.
Jason, I personally would feel like that a release before a named storm or any type of weather condition would be at the request of the city of Houston.
I agree with the protocol for how that's initiated.
Okay,
I mean, it's their water. They're the one that is managing drinking water supply to the city of Houston. And I feel like that it's important to have their involvement in deciding to be able to release water downstream like that.
the letter from the mayor stipulates 200 feet in the spring and then 199 and a half feet August the 1st. Okay, I'm suggesting that we go from August the 1st to September the 1st. Instead of 199 and a half, we stay at 200. And after September the 1st, then they say, okay, we want to lower another 6 inches. We can make that as part of our policy, our recommendation, say 200 feet till September the 1st. After September the 1st, it goes to 199 and a half. Those are the numbers in the mayor's letter. I'm just changing the time period that it would be.
Almost. The mayor has requested 199 and a half plus another 6 inches of pre-release. You seem to be saying the additional 6 inches down to 199 and a half is after I get it, it's after September 1st, but is it the max? Is that all you're recommending is 6 more inches? Or is it what the city says? 6 inches plus the ability to call for 6 inches of pre-release. That's
The
the
ability
difference.
to call for 6 inches of pre-release in the face of some weather event, I don't have any problem with that. If the city says we have a weather event and we want you to drop another 6 inches and they tell us, then we do it. So, but I don't see them cumulative. I see them as the potential for that additional 6 inches being called if a weather event comes. If there's no weather event, we just dropped to 199 in late, a foot in August and then a foot after the peak season. So it still matches their numbers. I'm just changing the timeline. I'm dealing with releases in the name of a potential named storm and imminent landfall here. That's a completely separate issue as far as I'm concerned. That's something that could happen in November.
All right, so then if I understand what you're describing correctly, for the fall season, it's 199 and a half seasonal lowering with 6 inches of that coming after September 1.
Right.
And the potential for the city to call for another 6 inches of pre-release.
If they so see a circumstance or situation with their people that they think justifies that, absolutely. I mean, and that, like I said, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I see it as very parallel to what they're saying. I'm just trying to stretch the last 6 inches into a time period after September 1st, where we don't impact people that have businesses on the lake so much. So,
Okay, so Jason, did you just summarize the spring, we understand, the fall, you're lowering to 200 between August 1st and September 1,
Yeah,
and then you're lowering another 6 inches at September 1 to 199.5.
exactly.
And then the other 6 inches would be with, if there's a named storm out there, but that would be initiated by the city of Houston.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think it's very close to both programs. It's just, I just want to see a little more relief for people. It just costs us 30 days at the most to give people on the lake a little relief, and it really doesn't, it doesn't extend or increase the jeopardy to our ability to lower the lake level. Is that, my wife's right, I'm hard to understand.
Well, if you look at the chart in front of us, I had to bring this up of where we're normally at in August. Anyway, you're proposing less than we are down on the average by Mother Nature.
That is my motion.
Okay. Let me restate it, just to make sure. All right, in the spring, your motion is for 1 foot to it's to 200 feet MSL, April, May, same as we're currently doing. For the fall, again, it's August, September. For the month of August, the lowering would be to 190, to 200. That's 1 foot in August. Then after September 1, there'd be another 6 inches down to 199.5. And during that fall lowering period, August to September, the city could call for an additional pre-release prior to a storm, which would take it down to 199.
Correct. Yeah, and that aligns with Mayor Turner's.
And the city would have to call for that pre-release.
Other than the time frame.
All right, Mitch, and that's through December of 2022. All right, Mitch, did I capture that the way you understood? Okay. So that is a motion by Tisdale.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd entertain a second.
I would second that motion.
I have a second. Any further discussion?
Question.
Yes.
From the staff's point of view, what do you see as issues with that proposal, if any?
Well, it's not what they recommend, but
Yeah, I mean,
that's what we're for.
No issue?
No, you took care of my primary concern by the fact that city staff has to call for that pre-release.
Yeah. We just prefer the city make that call.
And we will coordinate, Mark, we will coordinate absolutely with all of, CWA, City Houston, on all of this.
All right.
And that motion is basically a recommendation to the city of Houston.
It's nothing but a recommendation. The city has the option to turn this thing any way they want. I think we're close enough that it certainly may merit some recommendation or discussion. Any more comments, Jen?
Are we on discussion now?
Yes. I'm just going
My
down.
only question, I thought Jim had a different motion on the table. So now we have two.
And then
No, he
because
amended his motion to be his motion.
it started getting great, and I tabled one. So, okay, and then, so yeah, we're in the discussion.
I think the motion you've made is disappointing. We are working with our partner. We have money to be had on the table with the Texas Water Development Board and with HUD money that's coming down, and we need to work as partners. They have given us work. We've ignored their proposal and made our own proposal. And I think if we want to be a partner, we should have first considered their proposal. And I don't think that it shows good stewards, because now we're just guessing on if they're going to accept our proposal. They gave us a proposal that they could live with, and it would be up to us to ratify their proposal. But that's my comment.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, any comment?
You know, I have very close friends and family that live around the Lake Conroe area. I also have very close friends and family that live downstream in both the Humble, Atascocita, and the Kingwood area. And so, you know, I'm very sympathetic to everything we've heard tonight from both sides. My heart goes out to the people that have been affected, both on the Conroe side and the Kingwood side. I'm not an engineer, I'm a banker. So I have to rely on our staff and the information they provide. At this point, I don't see the negative side to the proposal.
With respect to staff, or?
From your side, I don't see a negative side to that, and from the staff side, at this point.
Does anybody have a comment? I mean, Karen has expressed her view. I think the negative side from her perspective, so I think that's good to have that. Does anyone else see?
I'm open to, you know, if someone can convince me otherwise, I'm open to listening.
Yeah. Mark?
Well, again, I thought I made a proposal to vote on the city's proposal first, and that's really what I think from a procedural standpoint, that's what we should do. Again, Jace referenced the cooperation and the spirit of the cooperation, and Karn's, you know, kind of seconded that. I don't know if you were the only one that could approve the motion, or if Karn could have approved that motion. So,
well, we have a motion and a second on the existing proposal. I can't re-inject a different.
so you can't amend the proposal?
Well, if the amendment is to change it to the city's proposal, is that what you're suggesting?
Right, that would have to be seconded, right, by somebody?
Okay, so your amendment to Jim's proposal is that we modify our proposal to align with the city's proposal?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so the amendment is that basically the proposal be changed to what the city has proposed. So we have that motion. Is there a second to that?
I second that.
Okay, got a second. Any further discussion? That's what their amendment was for the city proposal. So that's what the vote is for, is to accept the city proposal. So I would ask for a show of hands on a vote, those that would approve.
Before you do, I just want to make sure I understand. Mitch, help me out. Mark's proposal is to scrap what I laid out and go with the city's proposal. We have a second to that, and you're about to call for a vote.
Now call for a vote to accept it as it was presented. So those that are in favor, by a show of hands. That are in favor of the city proposal, show of hands.
What would say it again? We're calling for the vote now.
To accept the
City
city's
of-
proposal. So we have two ayes. Those opposed? All right, so we have 4 nays. Okay, so we're back to, I guess, the proposal that Jim made. Is that correct? Is that right?
So yes, now you're back to what I laid out before, which is essentially the only difference from the city's proposal is that 6 inches of the 1.5 feet of seasonal lowering occurs after September 1. Everything else is basically the same.
Basically, everything's the same. Little difference. And then we have them call it for it. So that's the motion. And is there a second? No? It's already second.
Yeah, Alexander's a second.
Okay, he's a second. All right. All in favor of that proposal?
4, 3, 4, 5.
Are you? No, you're not.
5 ayes,
5 ayes and those opposed?
1 nay.
All right, we have 1 opposed and 5 in favor. The motion passes. Be glad to get anybody that needs a copy of what that is if they need it.
Spell it out. Spell it out.
No other items on the agenda. Without objection, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Beth.
Let's see. Jace, what did the board vote
First of all, your
on
name, Jake.
tonight?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Sure.
Get it together.
Jace Houston, General Manager, San Jacinto River Authority. So tonight, the board basically is sending a recommendation to the City of Houston. They're our partner in the region on flood management, and so it's certainly a coordinated effort. But what the board voted on was to continue the seasonal lowering program. The spring lowering will essentially be the same. It's a 1 foot lowering down to 200 feet MSL in the months of April and May. That's the spring, and that's unchanged. For the fall, it's a 1 foot lowering to 200 MSL in August, the month of August. After September 1, we would begin another 6 inches down to 199.5. And during that month, if there's a named storm in the Gulf, the city can initiate a pre-release of 6 more inches of water down to 199 at their call. If they call and they initiate it, then they can call for another 6 inches down to 199. That's basically, it's a recommendation back to the city for them to consider. It also included a provision that the staffs coordinate to kind of work out, and we always do, coordinate to work out the details and the timing, because there's a lot more involved. I think I had one more. Oh, and that it would continue through December of 2022. That was the last part of the motion. So that's the River Authority's recommendation down to the city.
Now, if the city doesn't accept that recommendation, then what happens?
Ultimately, right now, it's their water being released. So they don't have to accept the recommendation. They can call for their water at any time. They could send a counter proposal back, I guess, to the River Authority. Really, it's kind of in their court.
What about now, a lot of people are talking Labor Day. Labor Day 7 days after the release starts.
Yeah, for simplicity's sake, I think they mentioned September 1. Labor Day, you're right, it's not always there right at the beginning of September. But we generally let that 6 inches out over 2 weeks anyway. That's been our pattern with the seasonal lowerings. Is we'll do the 1 foot in August, it'll be over 30 days. And we'll do the 6 inches in September over probably 2 weeks. We'll work out those details with the city. So it won't all be after Labor Day, but
What kind of flow does that constitute? When you do, say the 1 foot in a month and 6 inches.
it really varies dramatically depending on evaporation. So if we've had a hot, dry summer and we're already 9 inches low and we only need to let out 3 more inches, it may be a flow of 100 CFS. Very, very, very small flow. If we have a storm in the middle of the summer and we're full on August the 1st, then it may be 300 or 400 CFS or something like that to get down that 1 foot over 30 days.
Historically, since the lake has been here, what has been the time that has been in this time frame has been over 200 feet?
Oh man, I don't have any way.
I mean, in that time frame, I'm saying,
Well,
not in a year, but I'm
so
saying
here's some numbers I know off the top of my head. We've looked at about the last 20 years of data recently, and the average level for Lake Conroe over the last 20 years has been around 200 feet, mean sea level. So about 1 foot low, and that takes into account some droughts, it takes into account some floods. But if you just average everything for the last 20 years, it's about 200 feet MSL.
All right, and your name one more time?
Jace Houston,
Spell your first name.
Jace.
Okay, thanks.
Very confusing vote because,
let me hit record. Tell me your name
yes,
again.
Dave Martin,
And you're the
Mayor Pro Tem, City of Houston.
Your thoughts on the vote?
What the board was trying to accomplish was to protect boating in Lake Conroe for Labor Day.
And what they voted to do did the opposite. It hurt boating on Labor Day in Lake Conroe because their decision was to take the lake level to 200 effective August 1st, 2020. And then to take it to 195 effective September 1st, 2020, when Labor Day is September 7th. So we're going to release an extra 6 inches of water before Labor Day, 6 days before Labor Day. And they were talking about protecting boating in Lake Conroe on Labor Day, which they did the opposite of. So leave here very confused.